He smirked right in the middle of grandmother's party. "You deserve worse." I had not even answered before my wealthy grandfather set his wine glass down. He told him, very lightly, "Step outside for a minute." The patio door burst open. Sea wind whipped through, and the helicopter came back for a second time, not to show off wealth, but to tighten the final legal noose. My name is Brianna Wade. I am 32 years old. On paper, I am a structural engineer, a person who finds comfort in load-bearing calculations and the predictable integrity of steel and reinforced concrete. But beneath that, I am a product of Port Armitage, Maine, for 10 summers. I was a lifeguard on these treacherous, rocky shores. That part of me, the part that watches the tide and scans the horizon for danger, never really goes away. Tonight, I was deeply, profoundly out of my element. Despite being surrounded by family, we were celebrating my grandmother's 85th birthday. The party was held at the Port Armitage Yacht Club, a place that reeked of old money and sun-bleached teak. The deck was massive, jutting out over the bay, and the air was thick with competing perfumes, expensive cigars, and the sharp, clean smell of the Atlantic. String lights were looped between wooden posts, casting a jaundiced, flickering glow that made everyone look slightly ill. The waves provided a constant, hushed percussion against the pilings below, a sound that usually calmed me. Tonight, it sounded like a slow, repetitive warning. The hostility was palpable. It was not overt, not yet. It was in the way my aunts clustered together, their backs physically turned to me. It was in the way my mother, Elaine, kept darting nervous glances in my direction. Her smile strained so tightly it looked painful. It was in the polite, icy vacuum that formed around me when I approached the bar. This was not a celebration. It was a tribunal disguised by champagne and seafood towers. The reason for my ostracization was, of course, the house. Wade's Pine, my house. For the past 6 weeks, I had been the reluctant star of a vicious social media campaign. My cousin, Sierra, Vince's youngest daughter, had become a minor local influencer by painting me as a heartless monster. Her live streams were masterpieces of passive aggression and weaponized grief. "I'm just so sad," she would say, her eyes glistening with crocodile tears. That Brianna would forget what family means. That house was meant for all of us. The comment section was a sewer. Brianna stole the family home. She thinks her engineering degree makes her better than everyone. She kicked her own family out. None of it was true. I had purchased the property at fair market value, using savings I had meticulously accumulated since my first internship, supplemented by a significant bonus from the Casco Bay Bridge project I had helped manage. The house was not a family heirloom. It was a rundown cabin my grandfather had won in a poker game 40 years ago and let decay. I had supervised the restoration myself, ensuring its structural integrity, replacing the rotted foundation posts, and insulating it against the harsh Maine winters. The deed was in my name. The title insurance was clear. The property lines were undisputed. But in Port Armitage, feelings often outweighed facts, and my family, specifically my Uncle Vince, felt they were entitled to it. My Uncle Vince Caro was the conductor of this orchestra. He ran Caro and Daughters Realty, a business that specialized in seasonal rentals and convincing retirees to overpay for ocean views. He was a man who believed his opinions were facts and his desires were mandates. He found me by the raw bar, nursing a seltzer with a lime. He did not approach me directly. He started a conversation with another guest, just loud enough for me to hear. "It is a shame, is not it? How the younger generation has no respect, no sense of gratitude." I kept my focus on the ice in my glass. I would not engage. I would not give him the scene he wanted. He stepped closer. The smell of his bourbon was overwhelming. "Brianna, look at you, all dressed up, pretending to be one of us." "Vince," I said, my voice low, "it is grandmother's birthday. Please." "Oh, right. Grandmother's birthday," he sneered. "The woman who practically raised you. The woman whose family you are trying to tear apart over some worthless shack." "It is not worthless," I said, my voice tight. "And I bought it?" "You bought it," He laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. You signed papers. You think that makes it yours? That house is Carol land. Girlie, it belongs to the family. He saw my cousin Sierra out of the corner of his eye. Her phone was up, held low, the red record light barely visible. He was playing to her camera. He lowered his voice, moving in so only I, and her microphone, could hear. I heard you had a visitor the other night. Someone left you a little note. My blood went cold. He was talking about the break-in. The note left on my kitchen counter. Give it back to the family, while you still can. Heard you were so scared you called the cops, he whispered, a smile playing on his lips. You should be scared, living up there all alone. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. You want to know the truth? You deserve worse. You deserve everything that is coming to you. The music did not stop. The party did not pause. But for me, the world went silent and sharp. The lifeguard training took over. A cold, clean rush of adrenaline that bypassed anger and went straight to assessment. Threat, Uncle Vince. Proximity, 18 inches. Posture, aggressive. Leaning in. Intoxication level, moderate to high. Environment, deck, surface, damp wood, potential slip hazard, railing, 42 inches high. Structurally sound. I checked it myself last year. Exits. Main doors to the clubhouse, 15 feet, blocked by 2 servers carrying trays. Stairs to the beach, 25 feet. Clear path. Witnesses. Everyone, specifically, Sierra, 2 o'clock, 10 feet, recording. My mother, 9 o'clock, 20 feet, frozen, looking horrified. Assets. 1 waterproof, tamper-sealed USB drive in the left pocket of my blazer. It contained every email, every scanned document, every screenshot, and the IP address log tracing the fraudulent lien filing back to his office. My evidence package, codenamed Anchor. Cameras. 1 high-resolution dome camera, model Axis P32, mounted on the clubhouse eaves. It had a clear, unobstructed view of Vince's face and my back. Its footage was cloud-based. I had checked. I made a micro-adjustment, shifting my weight to my back foot, angling my left shoulder slightly away from him, a non-confrontational stance that also prepared me to move if he got physical. I was calculating the time it would take for security to cross the deck. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Before I could even speak, before I could deploy the verbal de-escalation I was practicing in my head, a new sound entered the scene, the scrape of a wooden chair leg on the mahogany deck. It was not loud, but it was decisive. My maternal grandfather, Augustus Reed, stood. Augustus was a man of quiet, immense gravity. He had built his port investment firm from nothing. He owned container terminals, shipping logistics, and as a result, held the unspoken allegiance of half the state's commerce. He was 75, but moved with the deliberate economy of a man who has not wasted a single gesture in 50 years. He was silent, he was sharp, and he was, above all, precise. He had been sitting at a corner table, observing. Now, he placed his wine glass down. He did not slam it. He placed it. The crystal made a faint, clear click that seemed to silence the entire party. He looked at Vince. His eyes were the color of the bay on a winter morning, gray, cold, and deep. "Vince," he said. His voice was not loud. It was a gravelly baritone that carried, "Step outside for a minute." Vince, who had been riding high on his own bluster, visibly deflated. Being the center of Augustus Reed's attention was never comfortable. "Augustus, this is just a family disagreement. Brianna knows she—" "Outside," Augustus said again. It was not a request. It was a judgment. As Augustus began to walk toward the far patio doors, the ones leading to the private landing, 2 figures rose with him. They had been at his table all night, speaking to no one, drinking only water, a man and a woman, both in severe, dark business suits that looked out of place at a birthday party. They looked like they belonged in a federal courthouse. They were guests of my grandfather, and I realized with a jolt that they were his legal team. The woman looked at me, her gaze sharp and analytical. It flicked down to my left blazer pocket, where the USB drive was. It was not a guess. It was a confirmation. She knew exactly what I was carrying. Vince looked trapped. "This is ridiculous. I am not going anywhere." Augustus paused at the door. "Now, Vince." As he turned, my gaze fell on the table he had just left. Next to his wine glass, stark against the white linen, was a small dark blue velvet box. It was not a jewelry box. It was too small for a bracelet, too thick for a ring. It was an anomaly. It pulsed with significance, but its contents were a complete mystery. Vince, seeing no support from the silent, watchful crowd, finally relented. He threw his cloth napkin onto his plate with a frustrated huff and stalked after Augustus. The two lawyers fell in behind him, flanking him, guiding him without touching him. The patio door closed behind them, muffling the sound of the waves. The party exhaled. Music swelled. Too quickly. People began to talk. Too loudly. But everyone was watching that door. I stood frozen, my seltzer warm in my hand. I replayed the last 30 seconds. Vince had been goading me for weeks. The social media attacks were public. The fraudulent lien on my house was a matter of public record. Even if it was buried, why now? Why did Augustus act at that exact moment? It was the phrase, "You deserve worse." It was not just an insult. It was a threat, and it was a confession. He had acknowledged the break-in, the scare. He had wished more harm on me. Why did that specific sentence, in a sea of insults, cause my grandfather, a man who famously never intervened in family squabbles, to deploy his personal legal team and summon my uncle like a truant schoolboy? What did he know that I did not? The patio door burst open again. It was not one of the lawyers. It was the wind. A sudden, violent gust of sea air that ripped through the deck, making the string lights dance wildly. It smelled of deep water and ozone. And with it came the sound. A low, rhythmic, thudding sound. Whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. It was a sound that did not belong over the gentle strains of the string quartet. It grew, rapidly, from a distant pulse to an overwhelming physical presence. The bass of it vibrated in my chest, rattling the glassware on the tables. "What is that?" someone shouted. Guests rushed to the railing, shielding their eyes as they looked up into the black sky. A blinding white light cut through the darkness, sweeping across the water and illuminating the whitecaps. It found the yacht club, painted the deck in harsh, sterile white, and then settled, focused, on the private helipad on the South Bluff, 100 yards away. It was a helicopter, a big one, a Sikorsky. It was Augustus's helicopter, the one he used to bypass coastal traffic, the one he dispatched like a taxi, but it was 9:30 at night. My mind raced. The lawyers, they had arrived with him, but he had been here all evening. Then I understood. The helicopter had come before. It had dropped them off, then retreated to a holding pattern, out over the water, waiting. This was its second trip. It hovered over the pad, its rotors generating a hurricane of displaced air. It was not there to be subtle. It was not a display of wealth. It was a display of logistics. It was a tool, summoned for a specific purpose. The sound was a physical assault, a screaming, mechanical vortex that drowned out all conversation, all thought. I looked at the closed patio door, behind which my uncle, my grandfather, and two very expensive lawyers were talking. The helicopter was not leaving. It was waiting. It was waiting for a package. It was waiting to file a report. It was waiting to tighten the final, inescapable knot of the legal noose, and I, Brianna Wade, was standing at the eye of the storm. That helicopter's rhythmic thudding was the sound of a closing trap. As it beat the air outside the yacht club, it threw me back 3 months, to a day that had been defined by a very different, much older sound, the creak of pine floorboards and the scrape of a brass key. It was 3 months ago, August. I had just closed on Wade's Pine. The name was my own. A private joke. The cabin was a small, two-bedroom structure on a bluff north of town, and my last name was Wade. It was simple. The house, however, was not. It had been neglected for decades, a forgotten asset. I bought it with 10 years of saved bonuses and the entirety of my payout from the Casco Bay Bridge project. My signature on that check was the proudest I had ever been. This was not a gift. It was not a family handout. It was a transaction. Clean and precise. I had the deed, the title insurance policy, and a 3-ring binder detailing the sale. As a structural engineer, I am, by nature, meticulous. I do not guess. I calculate. I verify. I had personally supervised the inspection. The term is an understatement. I spent a week crawling under the house, mapping the decay in the foundation posts. I used an impact hammer to test the integrity of the original chimney concrete. I built a 3-dimensional model of the roof trusses to calculate the precise snow load it could bear before and after my planned repairs. I knew every weak point, every hidden strength. I had the clean contract, the paid-up insurance, and my own engineering report, stamped and sealed. That house was mine by law, by finance, and by sweat. The trouble started quietly. It began not with a shout, but with a piece of certified mail. I received a notification from the East Hollow County Registrar of Deeds. It was a notice of recorded instrument. It was bureaucratic, bland. I almost dismissed it as a tax update. I opened it. A lien had been filed against my property. I remember my hands went cold, but my mind went hot and sharp. I went straight to the county's digital portal. I typed in my parcel ID, and there it was. A lis pendens, a notice of a pending lawsuit, filed by Caro and Daughters Realty. Plaintiff, Vincent Caro. The filing claimed the property was a disputed shared family asset and sought to block any sale or refinancing. It was a lie, a complete, total fabrication. But a lie on a legal document is a powerful thing. It clouds the title. It paralyzes the asset. It was a digital boot on the neck of my new life. Vince had not filed a lawsuit. Not really. He had just filed the notice of one. A cheap, dirty trick to drag me into a fight, to force me to the table, to force me to share what was not his. The same week the lien appeared, the public assault began. My cousin Sierra went live on Instagram. I watched it on my laptop, the volume low. She was sitting in her pristine white SUV, dabbing at her eyes. I just have to speak my truth, she said, her voice trembling with manufactured pain. Family is supposed to be about grace, about remembering where you came from, and when one person, just turns their back on all of us, over a house. She did not need to say my name. The comments section did it for her. Brianna Wade is a greedy monster. She forgot her roots. That house belongs to all the Caros. Shame, shame, shame. My first instinct was to fight, to go online, to post my deed, my bank statements, my inspection reports, to show the world the clean, hard math of the situation. But I had been a lifeguard. I knew that when someone is drowning, they will climb on top of their rescuer, pushing them under to get one more breath. You do not reason with a drowning person. You control the situation. I did not engage. I did not post a single reply. Instead, I opened a new, encrypted folder on my laptop. I took high-resolution screenshots of Sierra's entire feed. I used a service to archive all the comments. I saved the video file. I went to my email and created a new folder. I dragged in the threatening, disappointed emails from my mother, Elaine, begging me to just be reasonable and let Vince have his way. I exported the call logs from my phone showing 23 missed calls from Vince in a single day. I was not building an argument. I was building a case. Then, 2 weeks later, the situation escalated from legal harassment to a physical threat. I came home from a site visit in Portland. It was late, almost 10 at night. The fog was rolling in, thick and wet. My new smart lock, which I had not yet installed, was still in its box on the passenger seat. I walked up to the old front door. put my original brass key in the lock, and it would not turn. I froze. I knew, with the certainty of an engineer seeing a stress fracture, that something was wrong. The lock was not jammed. It was already unlocked. I pushed the door open. The air inside was cold, different. Someone had been there. I did not go in. I backed away, down the steps, pulling my phone out. I stood by my truck, my heart pounding a frantic, heavy beat against my ribs, and I called the sheriff. When the deputy cleared the house, we found it. On the kitchen counter, placed directly in the center of the newly installed butcher block, was a single piece of paper. It was cheap, lined notebook paper, torn from a spiral. On it, in blocky, uneven capital letters, "Give it back to the family while you still can. Give it back to the family while you still can." The deputy was young. He bagged it. "Probably just some kids, ma'am, or one of your family members playing a stupid prank." "They used a key," I said, my voice shaking with a cold I had not felt before. "It was not a forced entry. They used a key." The only other keys belonged to the seller, who was in Florida, and the Caro family, years ago. My grandfather had given Vince a key to check on the place. I had specifically asked for it back at the closing. Vince had claimed, with a wave of his hand, that he had lost it ages ago. That night, I did not sleep. The next morning, I secured my house. I installed the Quickset smart lock, the one with the keypad and the remote access log. I installed 3 high-definition motion-activated cameras, one on the porch, one on the driveway, and one on the back door. I installed magnetic contact sensors on every window. My house was no longer just a home. It was a fortress. I, a structural engineer, had reinforced my perimeter. And I went back to the county's digital portal. I was angry, but I channeled it. I thought like an investigator. If Vince was sloppy enough to use a family key, he was sloppy about other things. I dug into the e-filing system for the lien. As an engineer, I e-file blueprints and permits all the time. I know these systems log everything. I went into the public-facing metadata of the lis pendens filing, and I found it. The filing, which had been submitted under the name of a paralegal at Vince's firm, had an originating IP address. I copied it. I ran it through a public tracer. The IP address was not from a law firm. It was not from the paralegal's home. It was from the main commercial block assigned to Caro and Daughters Realty's office on Main Street. He had filed a fraudulent legal document attacking my property from his own desk. He was not just a bully, he was a fool. I saved the report as a PDF. I sat in my new, secure house, watching the camera feed on my laptop, and I called my grandfather, Augustus. I did not call to cry. I did not call to ask for help. I called to report. I laid out the facts, cleanly, chronologically, the purchase, the lien, the IP address, the break-in, the note. He listened, as he always does, in total, unnerving silence. When I was finished, there was a long pause. I heard the faint clink of an ice cube in a glass. Then, he asked me a single question. It was not, "Are you okay?" It was not, "What do you want me to do?" He asked, "Brianna, did you keep the physical registrar's receipt for the title filing? The one they stamped at the window?" "Yes," I said, surprised. "I have it. It is in the binder." "Good," he said. "That is the anchor. Everything else is digital. That is the physical proof of original. Clean title. Guard it." And he hung up. I went to my binder. I took out the original, stamped, dated receipt from the East Hollow County Registrar of Deeds. I put it, along with the waterproof USB drive containing all my evidence, into a small, fireproof safe. My grandfather's word had sparked something. Anchor. I went back to my laptop. I took the folder with the screenshots, the videos, the emails, the call logs, the IP trace report, and the scanned copy of the police report for the break-in. I zipped it. I named the file, Anchor. I sat back, looking at the name. This was not revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is about the past. This was about the present. This was about holding my ground. This was about preserving what I had built with my own hands. This was not a fight I started, but it was one I would finish. I am an engineer. I do not let my structures fail. The reconciliation dinner was my mother's idea. The phrase dripped with her signature brand of hopeful denial. She had booked a private room at the Mariner, a restaurant where the entrees started at $60 and the waiters were trained to ignore simmering family feuds. The room was all dark wood, nautical paintings, and a large, oppressive floral arrangement in the center of the table that smelled funereal. I arrived last, on time. They were all there. My mother, Elaine, smiling a brittle, terrified smile. My stepfather, Gary, a man who had perfected the art of being invisible, was already studying the breadbasket as if it held the secrets to the universe. My uncle Vince, who gave me a magnanimous, "So glad you saw sense," smirk, and my cousin Sierra, who was already discreetly positioning her phone on the table, the lens just peeking out from under a napkin. And at the head of the table, silent and immovable, was my grandfather, Augustus Reed. His presence was a surprise. He never attended these performances. His attendance changed the calculus. It elevated the evening from a mere ambush to a formal hearing. "Brianna, darling," my mother said, rushing to take my coat, her voice an octave too high. "Thank you for coming. I knew you would. We just need to talk this out, like a family." "I am here, Mom," I said. I did not return her smile. I sat down opposite Vince. A waiter appeared, filling water glasses. The silence stretched, thin and fragile. "Well," Vince began, leaning back in his chair, lacing his fingers over his stomach. He was the picture of a man in charge. "This is nice. Good to see you joining us. Brianna, we were all very worried about you. This misunderstanding, it has been hard on your mother." "My mother," I said, my voice perfectly level, "seems to be handling it by inviting me to dinner. Let's talk about the misunderstanding. Vince, let's talk about the fraudulent lien you filed against my property." The smile on his face did not falter, but his eyes hardened. "Now, Brianna, that is hostile language. We are family. The house is a family asset. It is a place we all share." "That is where you are wrong," I said. "I bought it. I own it. The deed is in my name. The title is clean. Or it was—" "Oh, Brianna," my mother jumped in, her hands fluttering. "You know what he means. That house has always been for everyone. Remember that summer, after your first year of college, you stayed with us? For 3 whole months? We took care of you. We have always taken care of you." The gratitude attack. It was their go-to weapon. The implication that I was an ungrateful wretch, biting the hands that had fed me. I had anticipated this. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin manila envelope. I did not hand it to her. I placed it on the table and slid it across the white tablecloth. It stopped just short of her wine glass. "What is this?" she asked, her voice wavering. "That," I said, "is a copy of my bank statements from that summer, highlighted. You will find the $2,000 electronic transfer for rent, which I paid in advance. You will also find itemized receipts from the grocery store for my share, and a copy of the final utility bill I paid in full before I left. I have never, not once, taken a dime from this family that I did not repay or earn." My mother's face went pale. She did not touch the envelope. Vince let out a short, sharp laugh. "My God. You keep receipts? What is wrong with you? This is not about money, Brianna. It is about respect. It is about loyalty." "Loyalty," I repeated. "Is loyalty filing a legal document based on a lie? Is it breaking into my house and leaving a threatening note?" "I have no idea what you are talking about," Vince scoffed, but a vein in his temple pulsed. "Then let me be clearer," I said, leaning forward. My voice did not rise. It did the opposite. It dropped, becoming colder, sharper. "You and I both know you used your office IP address to file that lease pendens. A child could trace it. You did not even bother to cover your tracks. Which brings us to why we are here. You did not invite me to reconcile. You invited me to see what it would take for me to drop the proof. Vince's smirk finally died. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw not his emotional niece, but an engineer who had found a catastrophic flaw in his design. It is just a simple adjustment, he stammered, his composure cracking. And there it was, the slip-up. A simple adjustment of the usage rights for business flexibility, the holding company. He stopped, realizing what he had said. He had dropped the family pretense. Business flexibility, I said, nodding slowly. So this was never about sharing. It was about you needing my house, my asset, to leverage for one of your deals. You tried to steal my house to prop up your business. You little... He started to rise, his face turning a deep, mottled red. Sit down, Vince. It was Augustus. He had not moved. His voice was a low rumble, but it had the effect of a physical blow. Vince froze, half standing, and then slowly sank back into his chair. My grandfather's eyes, cold and gray, met mine. He was not looking at me with affection. He was looking at me with something far more valuable. Professional assessment. He was a predator, and he was watching another predator work. His gaze flicked, just for a second, to the breast pocket of his own suit jacket. I saw the faint outline of the small, velvet box I would later see at the party. It was as if he was checking his watch, or perhaps checking his weapon. The room was utterly silent. My stepfather looked like he might pass out. This is what is going to happen, I said, speaking directly to Vince, but loud enough for the entire table. You have 24 hours, not a minute more. First, you will file a full retraction of the fraudulent lien with the East Hollow County Registrar. I want a stamped copy delivered to my lawyer by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Second, Sierra. I turned to my cousin. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide. You will post a public apology on Instagram, the same platform where you have been slandering me for 6 weeks. You will state, clearly, that you lied. You will state that I am the sole legal owner of the property. You will state that the lien was filed in error and has been withdrawn. You will leave that post up for no less than 30 days. If you do both of those things, I will not forward my evidence package to the State Bar Association or the district attorney. The dam broke. Sierra burst into tears. But these were not the soft, manipulative tears from her videos. They were tears of pure, unadulterable red rage. You cannot do this, she shrieked, all pretense gone. You are a horrible person. You were always jealous of me. Always. You think you are so much better than us with your stupid degree and your cold heart? Dad, do something. Vince just stared at me, his jaw working. He was trapped. I stood up. I placed my napkin, untouched, on the table. My offer is on the table. Vince, 24 hours. I looked around at my silent, shell-shocked family. They had come here expecting me to crumble. They had spent years believing my quiet, methodical nature was a weakness. They had mistaken my patience for passivity. They were wrong. Tomorrow, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. The Registrar of Deeds will have work to do, one way or another. I turned and walked to the door. Brianna, wait, my mother cried, scrambling after me. She grabbed my arm in the hallway, just outside the private room. Her face was frantic. What are you doing? She hissed, her eyes darting back to the closed door. You are humiliating us. Think of what people will say. Do not embarrass this family. Embarrass the family? I said, my voice low and dangerous. He filed a fraudulent document. He broke into my home. He is trying to steal from me. But you are worried about embarrassment? He is your uncle. We have to find a compromise. There is no compromise for theft. Mom. I pulled my arm from her grasp. As I did, a waiter I had not seen before stepped into my path. He was tall, dressed in a sharp black suit, and looked more like a security agent than a server. Ms. Wade? He said. Yes? He held out a small silver tray. On it was a single, heavy stock card. Not a bill. It was a business card. I picked it up. On the front, just a logo. Reed Harbor Trust. I flipped it over. Someone had written on the back in a sharp black script I recognized as my grandfather's. It was not a message. It was a directive. South Bluff Heliport, 2130. 9:30, tonight. I looked at the card, then back at my mother. Her face was a mask of confusion and fear. I looked back at the closed door of the dining room. I could hear Vince's raised voice, muffled but furious. He was losing control. I looked at the card again, 9:30. My grandfather had set this in motion before dinner had even started. He had known. He had been waiting. I put the card in my pocket. I looked back at the table I had left. My plate was empty. My silverware was clean. I had not taken a single bite of their food. I had not broken bread with them. I had not participated in their sham reconciliation. I left my fork unused. And I walked out of the restaurant, leaving my mother in the hallway. And for the first time in my life, I did not look back. I had taken back the power to decide. Vince's 24-hour deadline was a joke. I had no intention of waiting. I was outside the East Hollow County Registrar of Deeds at 7:55 a.m. the next morning. 10 minutes before they opened. The air was cold, and the salt from the harbor stung my face. I was not alone. "Rowan Pike," he said, extending a hand. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with a lean, sharp look, like a marathon runner. His suit was practical, not flashy. His firm, the North Shore Legal Collaborative, had been Augustus's single, 2-word recommendation when I called him after the dinner. "He's not family. He's a tool. Use him." "Brianna Wade," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm. "Thank you for meeting me this early." "This is when the work gets done, Ms. Wade," he said, his eyes already scanning the building's entrance. "Let's go." We were the first ones through the door. While I had been sitting at that sham dinner, Rowan had been drafting. I was an engineer. I appreciated a man who came with blueprints. We did not go to the main counter. We went straight to the public records office, where a young clerk I recognized, Logan, was sipping a coffee. His eyes widened when he saw me, and they widened further when he saw Rowan Pike, who had a reputation for suing the county and winning. "I am here to file a formal complaint of fraudulent lien," I announced, my voice clear and loud in the quiet room. "Parcel ID 744A, the list pendens, filed by Caro and Daughters Realty." Logan's hand visibly trembled. "Ma'am, you'd have to—" Rowan stepped forward and placed a heavy bound document on the counter. "This is an official complaint," he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "It outlines the filing of a fraudulent instrument, a violation of state code. We are also filing this." He slid a second document over. "A notice of dispute. We are formally challenging the validity of the lien, which, as of this moment, freezes this property. Any attempt to transfer, sell, or leverage it is now blocked, pending our hearing." I had given them an ultimatum. This was the follow-through. I had just legally frozen my own house, but in doing so, I had cut Vince's legs out from under him. He could not use it for his business flexibility now. "Next," Rowan said, and he looked at Logan with a predatory stillness. "We will need all file wrapper documents related to the original fraudulent filing, IP logs, timestamps, and the name of the clerk who processed it." Logan looked like he was going to be sick. We left the registrar's office and went to a small coffee shop next door. "He will not comply," I said, stirring my black coffee. "I do not need him to," Rowan said. "I just needed to put him on notice. He is the weak link. Now, what else do you have?" I had gone home after the dinner, my mind racing. I had not slept. At 2:30 a.m., I had sat at my kitchen counter, the house silent and secure, and I had done what I always do. I checked the data. I reviewed the security logs from my new camera system. "He came back," I said. "Or he tried." I opened my laptop. This was last night, or technically, this morning, 2:11 a.m., just hours after I walked out of that restaurant. I played the video. The high-definition infrared cut through the darkness. The footage was time-stamped, 02:11:04. A dark-colored SUV pulled into my driveway, its lights off. The model was distinct, a late-model Ford Explorer, the kind his company leased. A figure got out. He was wearing dark clothes, gloves, and a beanie. He moved quickly to my front porch. He tried the old key. He rattled the knob. Then he saw the new smart lock. He froze. He looked up, his eyes searching, and he looked directly into the camera I had hidden in the eaves. It was Vince. His face was clear, pale, and twisted in an expression of pure, impotent rage. He tried to shield his face, but it was too late. He backed away, ran to his car, and sped off. Rowan watched the video twice without blinking. "The license plate," he said. "I could not get it from this angle," I said. But I did not need to. I opened another file, a photo I had taken in a public parking lot on Main Street 2 weeks ago. When I first started building my anchor file, it was a clear daylight shot of the Caro and Daughters Realty parking area. 3 company-branded Explorers were parked in a row. I zoomed in on the license plate of the one Vince always drove. "Now," I said, "let's look at the parking system data from the garage at the restaurant last night." I had called in a favor to an old high school friend who ran security for the Port Authority, which managed the garage. Vince Caro, Caro and Daughters, account number, plate number. I read it aloud. The numbers matched. He drove his company car, with its company-registered plate, to the restaurant. Then he drove that same car to my house to, what, intimidate me? Break in again? Rowan just smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Data," he said. "Beautiful, clean, irrefutable data, an engineer and a lawyer. We are going to get along just fine." By noon, Rowan had weaponized my evidence. He drafted and sent 3 cease and desist letters via courier, all requiring signatures on delivery. One went to Vince, at his office. It detailed, in 6 single-spaced pages, the charges of fraudulent filing, harassment, stalking, and attempted trespass. Citing the video evidence, the second went to Sierra. It was shorter, but no less brutal. It demanded the immediate removal of all libelous and slanderous content, with a full, public retraction. The third, and most strategic, went to the East Hollow County Registrar of Deeds. It was addressed personally to Mr. Logan Harris. It informed him that he was now considered a person of interest in a conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and that our next filing would name him as a co-conspirator unless he cooperated fully. The hornet's nest was officially kicked. Sierra was the first to react. She did not retract. She doubled down. By 3 p.m., a new video appeared. It was heavily edited. It was dark. Shaky footage from her phone at the dinner. She had doctored the audio. "You cannot do this!" her voice shrieked, making her sound like a victim. Then it cut to my voice, cold and clear, from a different part of the conversation. "You will state, clearly, that you lied." Out of context, I sounded like a blackmailer. The comments section exploded. "She's threatening her family. What a monster." I called Rowan, my hands shaking with rage. "I have to respond. She's twisting my words." "No," Rowan said, his voice calm. "You do not. You will not. The fight is not on Instagram. Let her scream into the void. We have a better response." By 4 p.m., he had filed for a temporary restraining order against Vince, using the 2:11 a.m. video as evidence of a clear and present threat. "Let's see her post that," he said. At 4:30, the family's lawyer finally responded. It was a panicked, sloppy email to Rowan. Our client, Mr. Caro, was simply acting in the interest of the broader family. The email read, "He holds a full family power of attorney, which grants him stewardship over all shared assets, including the property in question." He attached the document. Rowan called me immediately. "Brianna, I need you to look at this. When did you close on Wade's Pine?" "August 12th, I said. And when? He said, his voice laced with something that sounded like laughter. Did you sign this family power of attorney? I looked at the scanned PDF. It was a generic form, downloaded from the internet. It was signed by my mother, my stepfather, and Vince, and the date, clearly visible next to the signatures, was August 20th. 8 days after I bought the house, I said, the pieces clicking. The house that was never, at any point, a shared asset. They created this after the fact to try and retroactively claim it. And, Rowan added, it is not properly notarized. This is not just void. It is pathetic. This is the document they used to convince that poor clerk, Logan, that they had authority. This is our key. At 5:15, Rowan's office phone rang. It was Logan Harris, the county clerk. He was crying. He had the cease and desist in his hand. I did not know, he blubbered to Rowan's paralegal. Mr. Caro called me. He said it was just a family dispute, to protect his niece from a mistake. He showed me a paper, a family authority thing. He said it was just a formality. I just pushed the filing through to be helpful. Please. I have a kid. I cannot be part of a lawsuit. By 6 p.m., Rowan had a sworn, notarized affidavit from Logan Harris, detailing the entire conversation, admitting he had bypassed procedure based on Vince's misrepresentation. The machine was in motion. At 7 p.m., my phone rang. It was a crisp, efficient voice I did not recognize. Ms. Wade, this is Caroline. Mr. Reed's executive secretary. Mr. Reed asks that you, via your legal counsel, transmit digital copies of all today's filings, the Logan Harris affidavit, and all video and data evidence to this secure email address. Mr. Pike will receive the same instruction. Of course, I said. I'll have Rowan send it immediately. Thank you, she said. A transport will be at the South Bluff heliport at 21:30 hours tonight to retrieve a hard copy, sealed package of the same from Mr. Pike. Mr. Reed likes to have physical copies. 9:30, the same time as the rendezvous my grandfather had scheduled with me. He was not just getting my side. He was building his own, parallel, and much more heavily armed, case file. The final call came at 8 p.m. It was Rowan. It worked, he said. The combination of the TRO filing, the 2:11 a.m. video, and the clerk's affidavit was a bombshell. The duty judge just saw it. He is not happy. He is not happy about the fraudulent lien, and he is really not happy that his county registrar's office was compromised. So what happens? We have been granted an emergency hearing, Rowan said. The judge is consolidating everything, the fraudulent lien, the TRO, the whole mess. He wants it handled, and he wants it handled now. When? I asked, looking at my calendar, which was suddenly feeling very, very full. Rowan told me the date. My blood went cold. Rowan, that is 2 days from now. That's my grandmother's 85th birthday. I know, Rowan said. The hearing is at 10 a.m. The judge is not giving anyone an extension. I guess you'll be seeing your uncle twice that day. Once in a courthouse, and once at a party. The timeline snapped tight. The party, the helicopter, the confrontation. It was not a random series of events. It was an orchestrated, legal, and logistical masterpiece. And the first performance was about to begin. The emergency hearing was set for 10 a.m. The party was at 8 p.m. We had less than 48 hours. Rowan and I were not just preparing for a hearing. We were preparing for a war on 2 fronts. The judge has the what, Rowan said to me over the phone, his voice sharp with caffeine and focus. He knows Vince filed a fraudulent lien. He knows, thanks to Logan's affidavit, that it was intentional. Now we have to give him the why, the motive. Judges hate being lied to, but they hate it even more when it is part of a bigger, dirtier financial scheme. I was already ahead of him. I am an engineer. I find patterns in chaos. While Rowan was busy drowning them in legal filings, I was digging into the money. I spent 6 hours that night. not sleeping, just cross-referencing public property records from 3 different counties. Vince was not just a bully, he was a predator, and he was sloppy. It was all there, in the dry digital ink of the county database. This was not the first time. He had used Caro and Daughters Realty to take out secondary, high-interest mortgages on 2 other family properties. One belonged to a great-aunt who was in a memory care facility in Portland. The other was a piece of undeveloped land co-owned by my mother and her sister. He had used convoluted, badly drafted power of attorney documents, just like the one he tried to use on me, to secure the loans. He was leveraging family assets, likely without their full, informed consent, to keep his own failing business afloat. He was a parasite, dressed as a patriarch. But why my house? Wade's Pine was a small, 2-bedroom cabin. It was sturdy, thanks to my repairs, but it was not a mansion. It held sentimental value for me, but it held no real financial power. Unless it was not about the house at all. I opened the Port Armitage Regional Development Plan, a 500-page document I had read for my own engineering work. I searched for new proposals, and there it was. The Armitage Deepwater Marina, a massive new high-end project slated for final approval by the end of the 4th quarter. It promised new slips, a luxury hotel, and high-end retail. It was the biggest thing to happen to Port Armitage in 50 years. I pulled up the zoning maps. I overlaid the marina's proposed footprint with my own property lines. My heart did not sink. It turned to ice. Wade's Pine was not near the project. It was the linchpin. The marina itself was to be built on the inlet, but my property, my little bluff, held the only viable, existing access road for heavy construction equipment. Without an easement from my property, the project's construction costs would triple, forcing them to barge in every piece of equipment and every yard of concrete. Vince did not want my house to share. He needed my land to secure his position as a local partner in the marina deal. The fraudulent lien was not just to bully me, it was to cloud the title so badly that I could not sell the access rights to the real developers, forcing me to sell to him for pennies on the dollar. He was trying to steal my seat at the table. My phone rang. The caller ID was a single letter. A. You found it, did you not? Augustus Reed's voice came through. No hello. The marina proposal, I said, my voice flat. My house is the access road. It is the linchpin, he corrected. And Vince is a fool. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. He came to me 2 months ago, Augustus said. He wanted my backing. He wanted Reed Harbor Trust to finance his piece of the development. He needed to show he had local assets secured. He used your name. He said the family was consolidating the land assets, starting with the old cabin, and he would be managing the easement. And you said? I told him he was a fool, Augustus said. I told him I do not invest with men who cannot control their own greed, and I told him I was already the primary shareholder in the Armitage Deepwater project. I refused him. The line went silent. The implications settled on me. So he went rogue, I said. He was denied the money, so he tried to steal the asset. He had to deliver my land to his new partners before the 4th quarter review. He is desperate, Augustus said, which makes him predictable. Rowan will have a new file in his inbox. Good night, Brianna. He hung up. An email chimed. It was from Rowan. Subject: Merry Christmas. He wrote, the terrified clerk, Logan, decided he needed to clear his conscience completely. He found a parallel file. Vince was so desperate to get the lien recorded that he also tried to file it in the adjacent county, Lincoln, hoping to bypass scrutiny here. It was a sloppy, amateur-hour move, and in his haste, he attached the wrong document to the e-filing. He attached an email chain. I opened the PDF. It was an email from Vince to his own attorney, the one who had sent the panicked power of attorney letter. The email was dated the day after I closed on the house. I do not care if it is not notarized. I do not care what the girl signed. Just get this filed somewhere, anywhere. We have to push the girl out of the house before Q4. The entire marina deal depends on it. Rowan's note at the bottom. This is not a smoking gun. This is a tactical nuclear weapon. See you at the hearing. The legal case was iron. The financial motive was clear, which meant my family had only one move left. My mother. She showed up at my house the next morning, the day of the party. She got past my driveway camera by holding a large casserole dish, a peace offering. I buzzed her in, my stomach tight. "Brianna, please," she said, setting the dish on my counter. She did not look at my renovations, at the new beams I was so proud of. Her eyes were red. "Please, stop this. You are destroying your uncle. You are destroying this family." "Vince is destroying himself. Mom, I am just documenting it. He made a mistake. He is under a lot of pressure. The business. It is just a house. Brianna, it is wood and nails. We are your family." She pulled out her phone, her hands trembling. She scrolled to a photo. It was me, age 7 or 8, perched on Vince's shoulders at a 4th of July parade. I was laughing, holding a little flag. This is who we are. Not this legal ugliness. It was a calculated, desperate move. The emotional blackmail. The appeal to a past that no longer existed. I looked at the photo, then I looked at her. My heart, which had been a cold knot of anger, suddenly just felt tired. "He broke into my home, Mom. He was just trying to talk to you. He filed a fraudulent lien to steal my land for a business deal your father refused to finance." Her face went white. She had not known that last part. "I am not setting myself on fire to keep Vince warm," I said, my voice quiet. I picked up the casserole dish. It was still hot. "I am not participating in this. I have a hearing in the morning, and a party tonight. You need to leave." I handed her the dish. She took it, stunned into silence. I walked her to the door. "This is my boundary. Mom, you can stand with him, or you can stand with the truth, but you cannot stand here." I closed the door. I was done being defensive. I went to my workshop. I laser cut a large, 12 by 18-inch piece of weather-resistant acrylic. I etched a large QR code onto it. Then I laminated the printout of the email. "Push the girl out of the house before Q4. I mounted it all on a steel post at the end of my driveway, right next to the no trespassing sign. The QR code led to a public-facing website I built in an hour. It had a header. "Notice of pending litigation. Parcel ID 744A. Below it, I embedded the PDF of the fraudulent lien, the Logan Harris affidavit, and the case number for the emergency hearing. Any trespasser, any developer, any partner Vince was trying to fool, would now have the full story. My security camera logged Vince's SUV driving by an hour later. It slowed, it stopped, then it sped away. I needed one more piece. I called Noah Briggs. We had been lifeguards together for 3 summers. He ran the night dispatch for the harbor pilots now. He saw everything that moved in the water or the air. "Noah, it is Brianna. I need a favor. I need flight and boat manifests for the South Bluff landing and the adjacent inlet. Past 48 hours. "That is highly specific," he said, "and probably illegal for me to give you. Hang on." I heard him typing. "Okay, you have got a lot of activity. Bry, Augustus Reed Sikorsky, logged twice last night, once at 21:30, once at 21:50, a 30-minute turnaround, and a private yacht charter, the Sea Esta, logged at the same time, docked in the inlet, registered to a holding company. Atlantic Development Partners. Vince's partners. They were in town. He was wining and dining them, taking them past my house, the house he had already guaranteed them he controlled. 9 p.m. The South Bluff heliport. The rendezvous from my grandfather's card. The air was cold. The wind so strong I had to hold my hair back. The Sikorsky was already on the pad, its rotors still. Augustus was standing next to it, watching me walk across the tarmac. "Rowan has the hard copies," I said, shouting over the wind. "He does," Augustus said. "He is a good tool." "You knew," I said. "The marina. You knew he was desperate. You knew he was coming after me. Why did you wait?" Why let it get this far? Augustus looked out at the dark water. I was waiting, he said, his voice a low rumble. I cannot stop a man from thinking about theft. I cannot stop him from being greedy. I can only stop him after he commits the act. I needed him to put his name on paper. I needed him to leave a trail. You needed me to be the bait. I needed you to be the engineer, he corrected. I needed you to find the flaw in his design, and you did. He reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out the small, dark blue velvet box. You asked why I got involved, he said. This is why. He opened it. It was not a jewel. It was not a ring. It was a key. It was a small biometric USB drive made of dark, polished metal. A single, sapphire blue light pulsed on its surface. This, he said, is the master key to the Reed Harbor Trust, the real one. I do not understand. Wade's Pine, he explained, like all my personal land assets, was placed in the trust 30 years ago. When you bought it, I stared at him. I did not buy it from you. I bought it from the county land bank. A faint smile touched his lips. And who do you think donated it to the land bank for the exact amount you had in your savings? I wanted you to have it, but I wanted you to earn it, to buy it clean, with your own name, your own money. What you did not know is that the trust contains a protective covenant, an ironclad, non-negotiable clause. It automatically vests any female descendant who legally purchases a trust asset with a set of absolute protections. He held up the key. Vince did not just file a fraudulent lien against you. Brianna, he filed it against an asset protected by the Reed Harbor Trust. My blood went cold. And that, Augustus finished, is a violation of a private loan agreement he signed with me 10 years ago. An agreement that explicitly forbids him from ever interfering with a trust asset, especially one held by a female heir. He just violated its core terms. He did not just poke you, Brianna, he poked me. And this little box? This is the key to the account that holds his loan. He snapped the box shut. Now, let's go to your grandmother's party. We arrived at the yacht club precisely at 8 p.m. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. This party was not a celebration. It was the pre-trial deposition, held in public. The deck was exactly as I remembered from my last visit, but the atmosphere was thick with a new, septic energy. The string lights fought against the heavy coastal fog, and the string quartet sounded like they were playing a dirge. My grandfather, Augustus, walked ahead of me, parting the crowd without seeming to notice them. He and his two lawyers took the same table in the corner, the one with the clear view of the helipad and the deck. I spotted the key players immediately. My lifeguard training kicked in. Identify the threats, the assets, the bystanders. Threat 1, Sierra. She was already in her element. Phone held high. Live streaming. We are all here. For Grandma's 85th. The whole family is coming together to heal. Her voice was a high-pitched saccharine weapon. Her followers were eating it up. Threat 2. 3 men in expensive, ill-fitting suits clustered near the raw bar. They looked uncomfortable, sweaty in the cool night air. They scanned the crowd, their eyes landing on Vince. One of them checked his watch. These were the partners from Atlantic Development Partners, the yacht charter guys Noah had identified. They were here to see the asset Vince had promised them. Threat 3. A woman I did not recognize, holding a small notepad and a pen, talking to my mother. My mother was nodding eagerly, dabbing at her eyes, a local reporter. Vince had invited the press to witness his victory. I was the target, but I was also an asset. I carried a thin leather portfolio. It contained hard copies of everything, and in my blazer pocket, a small, encrypted USB drive, the one containing the anchor file. Vince waited until my grandmother had cut her cake. It was a calculated, theatrical moment. He stepped into the center of the deck, tapping a champagne flute with a knife. The string quartet quieted. Friends, family, he began, his voice booming with false sincerity. He was a natural performer. "Thank you all for being here for my wonderful mother's 85th birthday. It means the world." He smiled, a wide, predatory smile. "And it means even more," he continued. "To see the entire family here, you know, in every family, there are disagreements, misunderstandings. Young people make mistakes. They get confused about what is important." His eyes found me. He was locking me in his spotlight. I stood perfectly still. "There has been some confusion lately about a piece of property, about what it means to be grateful, about what it means to share." The three investors stiffened. This was the show they had come to see. "But I am happy to say," Vince said, opening his arms wide, "that this confusion is over. We are a family. We heal. We forgive." He looked directly at me. His voice dripped with condescension. "Brianna, come on up. Honey, it is okay. We forgive you." The crowd murmured. Sierra's camera was tight on my face. He was staging a public reconciliation, casting me as the prodigal daughter. "Come on, Brianna," he urged, smiling. "Tell everyone it was all a misunderstanding. Apologize to the family, and we can put all this ugliness behind us. For Grandma." He wanted me to apologize, to publicly invalidate my own legal claim, in front of his investors and the press. I did not move toward him. I simply set my portfolio down on an empty table near the large television screen the club used for sailing regattas. I took a breath. "You are right, Vince," I said. My voice was calm, but it was amplified. One of Augustus's lawyers, the woman, had quietly handed a small wireless microphone to the AV technician, who had recognized her and immediately complied. My voice was now coming through the same speakers Vince had just used. He looked stunned. The smile flickered. "There has been a great deal of confusion," I continued, "and I believe in clarity, especially in matters of law and engineering." I took the first document from my portfolio. This is a letter of confirmation from the East Hollow County Registrar of Deeds, dated yesterday. It confirms that the lis pendens you filed against my property has been flagged as fraudulent, based on a sworn affidavit from the processing clerk. A gasp went through the crowd. The reporter's head snapped up. "He admitted," I said, my voice cold and clear, "that you pressured him into filing it, using a fabricated power of attorney that was dated 8 days after I legally purchased the house." "Now, Brianna, that is a lie," Vince shouted, his face turning dark red. "That is the what," I said, ignoring him. "Now for the why. You told us this was about sharing, about family, but that was not true either." I took out the second document and held it up. It was the Armitage Deepwater Marina proposal map, with my property lines highlighted in red, showing the easement. "This," I said, "is the marina project. My property, Wade's Pine, controls the only viable construction access road. You did not want my house. You needed my land. You needed it to secure your position with your new partners." I nodded toward the 3 sweating men at the raw bar. "The gentleman from Atlantic Development Partners, I assume you did not tell them that you do not, in fact, control the asset you promised them before the 4th quarter deadline." The 3 men looked at Vince. Their expressions were murderous. "This is slander!" Sierra shrieked, rushing forward, her phone pointing at me. "She is a liar. She is threatening us. I have proof. I have proof of what she really is." She fumbled with her phone, plugging it into the public sound system. She played the clip from the dinner. Her own voice, crying, "You cannot do this." Then my voice, cold and edited, "You will state, clearly, that you lied." The crowd recoiled. The reporter scribbled. Vince looked relieved. He thought this was his winning move. "See?" Sierra yelled. "She is a blackmailer. She threatened me." I waited. When her audio clip finished, I looked at the AV technician, who was already cued by Augustus's lawyer. "That is a very creative edit, Sierra," I said. "But at the dinner, you were not the only one recording." I pressed a key on the laptop I had connected to the main screen. "This," I said, "is the full, unedited security footage from the restaurant's private dining room, which my lawyer subpoenaed this afternoon. The 50-inch screen flickered to life. The audio was crystal clear. The whole scene played out. My mother's plea, my itemized receipts, Vince's slip of the tongue about business flexibility, my full 24-hour ultimatum: withdraw the fraudulent lien or I would go to the DA. Then, the screen split. On the right, the restaurant footage. On the left, a new video feed played. Timestamp: 02:11:04 a.m. My front porch. Vince, in gloves, rattling my doorknob. Vince, looking up, his face pale with rage as he spotted my camera. The crowd went absolutely silent. You could hear the waves crashing. The reporter was writing so fast her pen was blurring. The lead investor from Atlantic Development Partners did not say a word. He just turned, signaled to his partners, and the three of them began walking, very quickly, toward the exit. My mother stared at the screen, her hand over her mouth. Vince, no. My stepfather, Gary, just looked down, his hands shaking so violently he dropped his glass. It shattered on the deck. Vince was trapped. He stared at the screen, his mouth open. That is doctored. It is all lies. You cannot believe this. He pulled out his phone. He started dialing. She is a snake. I am calling my lawyer. I am calling. He looked at his phone, his face gray. No one was picking up. His partners were halfway across the parking lot. His lawyer was, I knew, busy reviewing the mountain of evidence Rowan had sent him. You can't believe her, he shouted at the silent crowd. I picked up the microphone. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire deck. I do not need your belief, I said. I just need the record to be read. Before Vince could respond, a new figure stepped out of the shadows. Rowan Pike. He was wearing a sharp, dark suit. He looked calm, professional, and utterly lethal. He was holding a single, bound document. He walked directly up to Vince. Vincent Caro, Rowan said, his voice clear and formal. You have been served. This is a summons to an emergency hearing at the East Hollow County Courthouse. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., before Judge Allister. Your presence is required. Vince stared at the paper as if it were a snake. He would not take it. Rowan let it drop. It landed on Vince's shoes. See you in court. The party was over. The investors were gone. The reporter was on her phone, likely dictating the front-page story. Sierra had finally, mercifully, stopped recording. My mother was weeping. A sound cut through the silence, not a glass shattering, a glass tapping. Ting, ting, ting. It was Augustus. He was tapping his wineglass with a silver knife. He stood. The main course is finished, he said, his voice a low rumble of command. We have eaten. Now, we will talk, like adults. He did not look at me. He looked only at Vince. The patio door, the one to the private landing, burst open. The sea wind whipped across the deck, just as it had in my memory. The low thudding sound of the Sikorsky helicopter's idling rotors pulsed in the air. Augustus gestured to the open door. Vince, he said, it was not a request. It was a summons. Step outside for a minute. The patio door clicked shut, and the noise of the party vanished, replaced by three sounds: the wind tearing across the bluff, the distant crash of the surf, and the overwhelming, thrumming beat of the Sikorsky waiting on the pad, its rotors spinning in a low, heavy idle. The air was so cold it felt like a slap. There were only four of us: my grandfather, Augustus Reed, my uncle, Vince, me, and Rowan Pike, my lawyer, who stood a precise 3 steps behind me, a silent, professional shadow holding a leather portfolio. Vince was shaking. It was not just the cold. It was the sudden, violent shift of power. He had been the ringmaster, and now he was in a cage. Augustus, this is insane, he blustered, his voice thin against the wind. She slandered me. You saw her. I am going to sue her. I am going to sue the club. Be quiet, Vince. Augustus did not raise his voice, but the command cut through the rotor noise. Augustus stood by the railing, the wind ruffling his gray hair. He looked perfectly calm. He reached into his coat pocket and removed the small, dark blue velvet box. He did not open it for Vince. He opened it for me. I showed you this earlier, Brianna, he said, his voice quiet, forcing us to lean in. But I did not explain its function. Inside, the metallic, biometric USB key pulsed with its faint sapphire light. This is the master key for the Reed Harbor Trust. You know this, he said. He then looked at Vince, his eyes flat and cold. What you do not know, Vince, is that the trust contains several interesting covenants. Covenants you should have remembered. Vince stared at the key. What the hell is that? What does this have to do with anything? That trust is your business. It became your business, Augustus said, when you filed that lien. He held up the box. First, Wade's Pine, while legally purchased by Brianna, was an original trust asset. As such, it falls under the trust's hostile action clause. Any illegal or fraudulent encumbrance placed upon it, such as a faked lis pendens, triggers an immediate, non-judicial review of all trust-related contracts. Vince's face went from red to a pasty, sickly white. Contract? What contracts? I have no contracts with your trust. You do, Augustus said. He snapped the velvet box shut. 10 years ago, when Caro and Daughters Realty was 3 weeks from insolvency, you came to me for a loan, a private loan, to save your company. I gave it to you. Not from my personal account, from the trust. My head snapped up. I looked at Rowan. He was impassive, but his eyes were focused. He knew my grandfather had given him this. It was a signature loan, Vince argued, his voice cracking. It was a family deal. I have been paying the interest. You signed, Augustus continued, as if Vince had not spoken. A very specific set of terms. Terms I wrote. He tapped the velvet box in his hand. Terms that are recorded, in full, on this device. Do you remember Article 4? Section B? Vince? Vince was silent. His breathing was shallow. I will remind you, Augustus said. It states that as a condition of the loan, you, Vincent Caro, are permanently forbidden from taking any legal, financial, or obstructive action against any asset held or purchased by a female descendant of my line. It was a clause I wrote to protect your own sister and her daughter from your greed. Augustus took a step closer. The wind whipped his coat, but he seemed as solid as the rock of the bluff. You did not just file a fraudulent paper against your niece. You violated a primary covenant of your own multi-million-dollar loan agreement with my trust. That is not enforceable, Vince stammered, looking wildly between us. It is a family document. It is not. It is a legally binding contract, Rowan Pike said, speaking for the first time. His voice was like a blade. Notarized, filed, and secured, and the penalty for violation is not a fine. It is immediate call-in of the entire loan principal, with interest. As of your filing that lien, you are in default. You do not just owe the trust money. Vince, you owe it all. Vince lunged, not for us, but for his pocket. He ripped his phone out. I am calling my lawyer. I am calling Frank. He will tear this apart. He will... He stared at the phone. There is no signal. What did you do? You are jamming the signal. We are not, Rowan said calmly. The helicopter, however, is on a registered flight plan that requires a temporary communications buffer for security. It is all fully permitted by the Port Authority. You will not be making any calls from this deck tonight. Vince looked at the Sikorsky, its lights cutting through the fog. It was not just a vehicle. It was a fortress. It was a legal bubble. This is a setup, he shrieked, the wind tearing the word from his mouth. You set me up, all of you. You set yourself up, Vince, I said, my voice shaking, but not with fear, with a cold, structural fury. You did this. You filed the paper. You broke into my house. You wrote the email. You underestimated me, and you underestimated him. Rowan stepped forward, past me, and placed his leather portfolio on the small iron patio table. He unzipped it. He pulled out a single, stapled document. It was 3 pages long. "This is not a negotiation, Mr. Caro," Rowan said, his voice all business. "This is a settlement agreement. You have 2 options tonight. This is option 1. You sign it." "Sign what?" Vince whispered, his eyes locked on the paper. "You will sign this document, which states the following. 1. You will immediately upon the courthouse opening at 8 a.m. tomorrow, file a full and complete withdrawal of the fraudulent lien, with prejudice, citing filing error and lack of legal basis. 2. You will post a public apology, drafted by my office, to all of your social media accounts and the Caro and Daughters website, stating you acted rashly and that Brianna Wade is the sole, undisputed legal owner of the property. 3. You will reimburse Brianna Wade for all legal fees, security upgrade costs, and associated expenses, the total of which is itemized on page 2. It is a significant number." "This is extortion," Vince breathed. "This is your dignity," Augustus said, his voice a low growl. "This is option 1. It is the polite option. It keeps this civilian." He looked at the helicopter. "You have 10 minutes to sign." Vince looked at me, his eyes pleading for the first time in his life. He was looking for the emotional niece he had bullied for 30 years. He was looking for the girl who would back down. He did not find her. I just stared at him. "And if I do not sign?" Vince asked, his voice barely audible. "What is option 2? Augustus looked at Rowan. Rowan reached back into his portfolio. He pulled out a much, much thicker document. It was bound, with tabs. Beside it, he placed a small, waterproof, hard-shell case. "Option 2, Rowan said, is what we call the full disclosure package. This package contains every piece of evidence we discussed tonight. The Logan Harris affidavit, the video of you at 2:11 a.m., the email to your lawyer, the IP trace, the financial analysis of your prior, similar actions against your other relatives, and," he nodded to Augustus, "a full copy of your loan agreement, the video of you signing it, and the trust's formal notice of default." The helicopter's engine noise changed. It did not get louder. The pitch just dropped, became heavier, more oppressive. It was lowering its altitude by maybe 20 feet, the downdraft pressing on us. A piece of paper on the table tried to escape. Rowan put his hand on it. "At the end of 10 minutes, Rowan said, "if this settlement is not signed, this package will be handed to the transport team waiting in that helicopter. A copy will be flown directly to the Port Authority's Oversight Board, informing them that their potential partner in the marina deal is financially compromised and engaging in real estate fraud. Another copy will be flown to the state's Attorney General, and the original will be on Judge Allister's desk, along with a request for punitive damages, before he has his morning coffee. The hearing will no longer be about a lien. It will be about your disbarment, your company's dissolution, and your potential criminal indictment." A bead of sweat ran from Vince's hairline down his temple, glittering in the helicopter's spotlight. He was trapped, legally, financially, and physically. You would do that?" he whispered, looking at Augustus. "To your own family? To your wife's brother?" Augustus Reed looked at the man his daughter had married into. He looked at the man who had threatened his granddaughter. "You insulted Brianna," Augustus said, his voice so low I could barely hear it. "You threatened her in her own home. You tried to steal from her. In doing so, you insulted your own signature. You insulted my trust. This is not family. This is business. This is a breach of contract." He checked his watch, a thin, elegant platinum timepiece. 9 minutes, Augustus said. "Sign, Vince, and you walk back into that party with what is left of your dignity. You will be poorer. You will be humiliated, but you will be intact, or you can fly with the evidence." The glass of the patio door was a one-way mirror. Out on the deck, we were in a cold, wind-blasted bubble of high-stakes negotiation. Inside, the party was frozen in a grotesque tableau. My grandmother's birthday cake, a 3-tiered monstrosity with 85 buttercream roses, sat untouched, a monument to a celebration that never happened. The string quartet had given up. Their instruments were cased. The guests stood in awkward, silent clumps. I could see my cousin Sierra. Her phone was still in her hand, but she was no longer performing. She was staring at her screen, her face ashen. I realized she was not counting views. She was reading the comments, the tide of public opinion. The one she had so masterfully manipulated was a tsunami turning back on its creator. And I saw my mother. She was standing alone, near the deck door, her hand pressed to the glass. She was not crying. She was just staring. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She was watching her world, the one she had built on denial and polite fictions, get dismantled by a wind-whipped downdraft and a set of legal documents. The wind howled, a high, mournful sound over the thudding rotors. It smelled of salt and deep, cold water. It threw me back 13 years. I was 19. It was a nor'easter, not a party. The storm had come up fast, hitting Port Armitage with gusts over 70 knots. I was on the emergency volunteer crew, a lifeguard pulling a double shift, checking the boats at the municipal dock. The rain was horizontal. It felt like tiny needles. I was roped in, moving from cleat to cleat, when I saw him. Vince. He was drunk, not just tipsy, but staggering, incoherent drunk. He was out on the unsecured floating dock, the one the harbor master had been trying to get condemned for years. He was shouting at the sky, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. The dock was pitching, waves washing over it. "Vince!" I screamed, my voice ripped away by the wind. He did not hear me. He slipped, falling hard on his back, his head missing a piling by inches. He just lay there, laughing, as the water surged around him. He was not a threat then. He was just pathetic, a 50-year-old man acting like a child. I unclipped my safety line. I ran down the gangplank. The dock heaved under me, slick with rain and sea spray. "Get up!" I yelled, grabbing the front of his jacket. He was dead weight. He swung at me, his eyes unfocused. "Leave me alone. Just looking at the... "You are going to die," I said, my voice flat. I was not angry. I was just focused. I was a lifeguard. This was a rescue. I got him in a cross-chest carry, my arm digging under his, my shoulder braced against his ribs. I dragged him. He fought me. He cursed me. He tried to trip me. It took me almost 20 minutes to haul his 190-pound, waterlogged body up the gangplank and dump him in the harbor master's shed. I left him there, wrapped in a moldy tarp, and went back to work. He never mentioned it again. I never mentioned it again. It was just a thing that had happened. Now, standing on this deck, the wind stinging my face, the man I had pulled from the drowning tide was standing in front of me. He had spent the last 3 months methodically trying to push my head under. The realization was not a hot flash of anger. It was a cold, quiet click, like a gear seating. It was the final, sickening clarification of who he was. I had not saved a man. I had saved a liability. "He signs this." Rowan's voice was a low, sharp whisper in my ear. "And we have him, but we can still go after him for defamation, for the break-in. This agreement stops the civil suit, but the slander charge, Sierra's videos, we can make that stick. We can ask for more." I watched Vince. His hand was shaking so badly he could not take the pen Rowan was offering. He was looking at the full disclosure package on the table. He was looking at the helicopter. He was a drowning man. And this time, there was no one to pull him out. "No," I whispered back to Rowan. My lawyer looked at me, surprised. "Brianna? He deserves..." "I am an engineer. Rowan," I said, my voice barely audible. "When I find a structural flaw, I do not just want to punish it, I want to correct it. The lien is the flaw. The title is the structure. I just want my house. I want it over. I want the record clean." Rowan held my gaze for a long moment. Then He nodded. Beside me, Augustus, who had heard everything, did not say a word. He just inclined his head, a fractional movement. It was not praise, it was acknowledgement. He had laid out a feast of revenge, a way to utterly destroy his enemy. I had refused to take a bite. I had set my own terms. I had not just won. I had defined the victory. He respected the boundary. Rowan placed the pen in Vince's hand, closing his fingers around it. Sign. Vince's signature was a spidery, illegible scratch. He shoved the paper back at Rowan. He did not look at any of us. Rowan reviewed every line. He nodded, slipped the signed settlement into his portfolio, and then zipped it. He stepped back. The test was over. Augustus gestured to the door. Vince moved like an old man. He fumbled with the handle, then stumbled back into the party. The patio door closed, and the room's sound rushed back in. The shuffling of feet, the awkward coughs. Vince stood in the doorway, pale, his suit damp, his hair wild from the wind. He was holding the summons Rowan had dropped. The paper crumpled in his fist. He saw the reporter. He saw my mother. He saw the silent, staring crowd. It was, he started, his voice a hoarse croak. He cleared his throat. It was a misunderstanding, a simple family misunderstanding. He looked at me, his eyes dead. About property lines. We have resolved it. It is all resolved. I watched Sierra. She was still live. Her mouth was open. Her entire narrative, the greedy niece, the stolen house, the family standing united, had just been detonated by her own father, who had publicly, if weakly, admitted it was all a misunderstanding. She was frozen, a digital deer in the headlights of the truth. My mother surged forward. "Oh, Vince, Brianna, thank God." She was crying, real tears of relief. The performance was back on. The family was healed. She rushed to me, her arms wide for an embrace, to pull me back into the circle, to bury the truth under a hug. I took one deliberate step back. My movement left her arms open, embracing nothing. The room went silent. "Mom," I said, my voice quiet but caring in the stillness. A hug only means something if there is respect. You cannot have one without the other. She froze, her arms still raised. It was not a rejection. It was a statement of terms. It was a new boundary line, drawn not in the sand, but in concrete. The silence was broken by a strange sound. Clap. It was the reporter. She was clapping. Slowly, not in applause, but in professional admiration. Clap, clap. A few other people joined in. The investors who had not left. My grandmother's oldest friend. It was not a celebration for a winner. It was a quiet, stunned acknowledgement of the truth finally making an appearance at its own party. The patio door opened one last time. It was not Augustus. It was two people I had not seen, who must have been with the pilot. They were in black flight suits, with Reed Harbor Trust stitched on the chest. They were all business. The helicopter team had not left. They walked directly to Rowan Pike. They were not there for Vince. They were not there for Augustus. They were there for the package. Rowan, as instructed, handed them his portfolio, the one containing the signed settlement. "This," the lead agent said, his voice flat, "will be delivered to the courthouse sub-basement by 0700. It will be first in the filing queue." They turned and walked out. The chain of custody was absolute. The document was no longer in our hands. It was in the system. The helicopter's engine noise roared, the pitch changing from an idle to a full-throated ascent. It was not a threat anymore. It was a courier. Its final task was complete. The sun rose at 6:03 the next morning. I was already awake. I was at Wade's Pine, sitting on my newly reinforced deck, a cup of black coffee in my hands. I was watching the light burn the fog off the water. I had not slept. My laptop, sitting on the small patio table, chimed at precisely 8:01 a.m. The email was from a no-reply address at the East Hollow County Registrar of Deeds. The subject line was clinical. Notice of Instrument Retraction. Parcel ID 744A. My hand was perfectly steady as I clicked the mouse. A PDF opened. It was a scanned copy of the settlement's first page, followed by a new, official county form. A large diagonal "Cancelled" was stamped across the lis pendens filing. The timestamp on the stamp was 7:45 a.m. The helicopter team, as promised, had delivered the signed agreement to the courthouse sub-basement before the doors even opened to the public. My title was clean. My house was mine. It was the first full, easy breath I had taken in 3 months. The consequences for Vince had begun before the registrar's stamp was even dry. The Port Armitage Beacon's website had posted its lead story at 5 a.m. The reporter had clearly worked through the night. The headline was a cannon shot. Marina deal implodes amid fraud allegations at yacht club birthday party. The article was brutal. It quoted anonymous guests who described the video evidence, Vince's public humiliation, and the dramatic last-minute reconciliation. It named Atlantic Development Partners, who were, the reporter noted, no longer reachable for comment. It detailed the fraudulent lien, linking it to the marina's access road. It was a masterpiece of journalistic evisceration. At 9 a.m., Rowan called. His voice was bright. "Good morning. Just so you know, the partners from Atlantic Development, they took the 6:15 a.m. flight out of Portland. They've already released a statement to the Boston Globe terminating their interest in the Armitage project, citing significant undisclosed misrepresentations by their local partner." The dominoes were falling, and they were falling fast. The biggest one hit at 9:30 a.m. This time, the call was not from Rowan. It was from Caroline, Augustus's secretary. Her voice was crisp. "Ms. Wade, for your records, the Reed Harbor Trust officially called in Mr. Caro's loan at 8:30 a.m., citing Article 4, Section B. He has 30 calendar days to repay the full principal, interest, and penalties. His personal and corporate assets, as pledged in the original agreement, are frozen as collateral." I did the math. The original loan, plus 10 years of interest. He was ruined, utterly and completely, not by me, by his own signature. Sierra's digital world vanished by noon. I checked her Instagram page. It was scrubbed. The tearful videos, the speaking my truth monologues, the doctored dinner clip, the accusations, all gone. Just a blank page, as if it had never existed. She thought deleting it would make it go away. She was wrong. Rowan had already couriered a spoliation letter to her lawyer. It was a legal hold notice, formally advising her that the deleted videos were considered key evidence in a potential defamation suit. It stated that their intentional destruction was, in itself, a sanctionable and potentially criminal act. The originals, of course, were already saved on my Anchor drive and in Rowan's case file. A new courier arrived at my door around 2 p.m. He handed me a simple white envelope from a local law firm, Vince's apology. It was not handwritten. It was on Caro and Daughter's realty letterhead. It had been drafted by his attorney. It was 1 paragraph long. It was dry, cold, and legally perfect. It contained all the phrases the settlement demanded. I deeply regret the misunderstanding. I acknowledge Brianna Wade as the sole, legal, and undisputed owner of Parcel 744A. The lien filed by my office was done in error and has been fully retracted. It was a document written by a man forced to swallow glass. It contained just enough words to satisfy the contract and not one single atom of genuine remorse. I did not care. It was not an apology. It was a receipt. It was the final, itemized bill for my trouble. I put it in the binder, right behind the canceled lien. The real prize arrived an hour later. Another package from Reed Harbor Trust. This one was large and heavy. I opened it on my kitchen counter. There was no money, no celebratory check. It was a full-size, bound set of blueprints and ecological impact studies for the Armitage Deepwater Marina. It was hundreds of pages of schematics, tidal flow data, and complex structural load calculations. Tucked inside the front cover was a single, heavy stock card with my grandfather's embossed logo. His handwriting was sharp. The project's primary structural consultant quit this morning, citing partner instability. The trust is now in full control of the development. We need a lead engineer who understands the Port Armitage bedrock and is immune to pressure. This is a formal offer of consultancy. Your rate is non-negotiable. It is double what they were paying the last guy. Call Caroline if you accept. I stared at the note. He had not given me a handout. He had not saved me. He had observed my methods and decided to hire me. It was not a gift. It was a promotion. It was a seat at the table, the very table Vince had tried to steal. The digital silence from my mother's side of the family was deafening. Until that evening. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. I miss you. My fingers hovered over the screen. The old Brianna, the lifeguard, would have jumped in. She would have swum out to her, tried to rescue her from the emotional wreckage, said, "It is okay." The engineer, the woman who had just rebuilt her own life, knew that some structures are too compromised to save. They have to be rebuilt from the foundation up. I typed back, "When you are ready to talk about the truth, I am ready to listen." I put my phone down, set it to Do Not Disturb, and did not look at it again. I went outside. The air at Wade's Pine was still and cold. The security cameras were silent sentinels, their blue lights glowing faintly in the dusk. I walked to the edge of my property, to the spot where the weak light from the bluff met the deep woods. I had bought a tree that afternoon, a small, 3-foot-tall white pine sapling. I dug the hole myself, my hands in the dirt. I worked the soil, mixing in compost, ensuring the roots had room to grow. I packed the earth firmly around its base and gave it water. It was a small, quiet, defiant act of permanence. This was my land. I was planting new roots. Peace, I was learning, is not a destination. It is a process of vigilant maintenance. Rowan called me just as the sun was setting. "You know," he said, "we could still go after them. The settlement only covered the civil complaint on the lien. It does not stop us from filing for defamation. Sierra's videos were seen by thousands. The public record is still messy. The newspaper article helps, but a formal judgment would clean your reputation completely. I will think about it, Rowan," I said, looking at my new tree. "Let me get through tomorrow." The reporter from the Beacon called, too. "Ms. Wade, that was an incredible story. I am hearing from other property owners that this fake lien tactic is more common than people think. Would you be willing to do an off-the-record interview? You could help a lot of people." "Let me get through tomorrow," I told her. Tomorrow. The hearing was still on the docket. This was the final step. The settlement was signed. The lien was canceled, but the court had not yet seen the agreement. Judge Allister had called an emergency hearing, and he was going to have one. Rowan had explained it to me. We needed to go. We had to appear, present the signed settlement, and have the judge sign off on it, closing the case. It was not a fight. It was a formality, a final legal stamp to make it all irreversible. But it felt incomplete. There was one last, nagging question. Would Vince even show up? He was ruined. He was humiliated. He had nothing left to lose. Would he, in a final, desperate, suicidal act of defiance, break the agreement? Would he stand up in court and lie, forcing us to deploy option 2 and have him dragged out in handcuffs? My phone buzzed. It was Caroline. "Ms. Wade, just to confirm, the transport helicopter will retrieve you and Mr. Pike at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow for the hearing. Mr. Reed will be joining you. He wants to be present when the final seal is stamped." Augustus was not taking any chances. He was not just sending his lawyers. He was coming himself, to watch the last nail get hammered in. The East Hollow County Courthouse was not built for helicopters. We landed on the secured roof of the adjacent county jail, the Sikorsky's blades beating a frantic rhythm against the old granite. Augustus, Rowan, and I were escorted by 2 silent deputies through a private sky bridge. We were not just attending a hearing. We were making an entrance. We entered Judge Allister's courtroom at 9:58 a.m. It was a small, wood-paneled room that smelled of old paper and floor wax. They were already there. Vince was at the defendant's table with his lawyer, Frank. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. His suit was rumpled. His eyes were bloodshot and vacant. Sierra was in the front row of the gallery, directly behind him. She was not on her phone. It was clutched in her lap like a dead bird. She was pale, her eyes darting between me and the judge. And my mother, Elaine, sat on the far side of the aisle, as far from them as she could get while still being in the same room. She was alone. She looked small. Rowan, Augustus, and I took our places at the plaintiff's table. We were a fortress of dark suits and leather briefcases. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Allister entered. He was an older man with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the building. He did not waste time. Case 7334, Wade v. Caro. I have reviewed the emergency filings. I have reviewed the signed settlement agreement submitted by transport this morning. Mr. Pike, Mr. Caro. Are you both in agreement that this document represents a full and final settlement of the civil claim regarding the lis pendens on parcel 744A? Yes, Your Honor, Rowan said, his voice clear. Vince's lawyer had to nudge him. Yes, Your Honor, Vince mumbled, his voice a dry rasp. Very well, the judge said. He motioned to the clerk. For the purposes of the public record, please read the stipulation for withdrawal into the record. The clerk, a woman in a crisp white blouse, stood. She read from the settlement, her voice a monotone drone. And in accordance with this agreement, the lis pendens filed on August 28th is hereby and forthwith withdrawn by the plaintiff, Vincent Caro. She paused, adjusted her glasses, and read the next, crucial line, a line Rowan had fought to include. The withdrawal is filed with prejudice, and the plaintiff stipulates that the original filing was made in error, without legal basis, and the East Hollow County Registrar of Deeds is hereby ordered to amend the public record to reflect that said instrument was canceled due to fraudulent filing. That was it. That was the kill shot. Not just withdrawn, not just settled, canceled due to fraud. It was now part of the permanent public record. My title was not just clean, it was purified. Anyone looking at the property's history would now see not just a dispute, but a clear legal judgment of Vince's crime. So noted, Judge Allister said. He picked up his pen. With this agreement signed and entered, this court considers the matter of the lien. Your Honor. Augustus Reed stood. The judge looked up, visibly surprised. He had not expected the silent, powerful man at the end of the table to speak. Mr. Reed, this is a surprise. Are you a party to this case? I am. Your Honor, Augustus said, his voice a low, commanding rumble that filled the small room. I am the primary lien holder on all assets, personal and corporate, held by the defendant, Mr. Caro. I am here as a concerned party, representing the Reed Harbor Trust. Vince's head snapped up. His lawyer looked panicked. Your Honor, this is a separate business matter. It has no bearing on... It has every bearing, Augustus said. This case is the precipitating event for a default on that loan. As this court is closing its record, I wish to enter 2 findings from the trust into the public record as well. It will clarify matters for any future creditors. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. He smelled blood in the water. The court is listening. Mr. Reed. Augustus looked not at Vince, but at the court stenographer, ensuring every word was taken down. First, the Reed Harbor Trust contains a proprietary, hidden addendum, Article 7. It states that any individual, beneficiary or otherwise, who knowingly and with malice attempts to defraud, encumber, or otherwise attack a protected asset held by a female descendant of the Reed line, shall be immediately and permanently disinherited from any and all current and future consideration from the trust. This is absolute and non-negotiable. A small, choked sound came from the gallery. Sierra. Second, Augustus continued, his voice relentless. This disinheritance clause extends not only to the primary actor, but to any individual found to be a witting accomplice, specifically through the use of public platforms to spread slander or misinformation intended to aid in the commission of the fraudulent act. Sierra let out a sound like she had been punched. She understood. Her name was not in the trust, but her father's was. She was a beneficiary through him, by helping him, by live-streaming her lies. She had not just been a bully. She had been a public accomplice. She had willingly, publicly, and fatally participated in the act that had just disinherited her entire branch of the family. She had not just lost her father's approval, she had lost his, and her, entire financial future. There was a moment of absolute, crushing silence in the courtroom. I looked at my mother. She was not looking at me. She was not looking at Augustus. She was staring at Vince, her whole life. My mother had navigated by his compass. Vince was the business side of the family. He was the one who knew how to get things done. He was the shark, and she had been a remora, happy to swim in his wake. Now, she was seeing him for what he was, not a shark, a failed parasite, a man so hollow, so greedy, that he had not only destroyed himself, but had taken his own daughter down with him. For the first time, my mother was not looking at him with respect, or fear, or even exasperation. She was looking at him with contempt. The business was a lie. The man was a failure. Her entire worldview had just been invalidated. Judge Allister finally cleared his throat. Mr. Reed, that is, a significant family matter. It has been noted for the record. This court thanks you for your clarity. He banged his gavel. Case 7334 is closed. We stood. It was over. As we gathered our papers, Rowan quietly slid one last document in front of me. It was a single page. This is the waiver for the defamation suit, he whispered. The one for Sierra. We have her. This is your choice. You can sign it and let her go. Or you can hold it. You can own her. I looked at Sierra. She was just sitting, rocking back and forth, her face white. Her phone was dark. Her career as an influencer, her status, her inheritance, all gone. She was just a girl in a courtroom who had been stupid. I looked at Vince. He was a ghost. I picked up the pen. I will sign it, I said, my voice clear. Rowan nodded. Good. It is clean. I will sign it, I repeated. On two conditions. Rowan paused. Augustus turned. Vince and his lawyer, who were halfway to the door, stopped. First, I said, I want an apology. Vince's lawyer scoffed. He already signed one. It is in the settlement. Not a legal apology, I said. Not a piece of paper. I want him, I pointed at Vince, to turn around, look at me, and say it, right here, no script. Vince turned, his body moving like it was being pulled by strings. He looked at me. His eyes were empty. Say it, Vince, I said. He worked his jaw. I... Say it. I am sorry, he whispered. It was a broken, pathetic sound. I am sorry, Brianna. It was not about forgiveness. It was about submission. It was about him acknowledging, in this final, formal place, that he was the one who was wrong. Second, I said, my legal fees are covered, but this could have happened to someone who did not have a structural engineer's mind, to someone who did not have Augustus Reed in their corner. This fake lean tactic, it is a tool for predators. I looked at Vince. I will sign this waiver, and he will walk out of here, but he will pay. He is going to establish a 5-year, fully endowed fund at the North Shore Legal Collaborative. It will be called the Wade's Pine Fund, and it will exist for one reason: to provide pro bono legal defense for local women who are being threatened or defrauded over their property. He will pay for the damage he did, by paying to ensure he cannot do it to anyone else. Augustus Reed, for the first time in my life, smiled. It was a thin, sharp, dangerous smile. Pay the debt the right way, he said, nodding. Vince's lawyer just slumped. We agree to the terms, he sighed. I signed the paper. I tore it in half and handed one half to Rowan. The legal scissors had made their final cut. We walked out of the courthouse. The heavy doors opened, and the cold, clean Maine wind hit my face. It felt like the first real air I had breathed in months. The black Sikorsky was waiting on the jail roof. The two flight agents were at the bottom of the courthouse steps, holding a secured briefcase. Rowan handed them the final, judge-stamped, sealed order. They nodded, turned, and left. The helicopter lifted off a minute later, a streak of black against the gray sky, taking the final truth to the state capitol to be filed forever. The knot was untied. Sierra stumbled out, her father trailing behind her. She looked at the empty sky, then at the street. Her live stream was over. Her audience was gone. She was just here. She had to face the real world, with no filter. Then, my mother approached me. She stood a few feet away, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. I did not know, she whispered. You did not want to know, Mom. I said. It was not an accusation. It was a fact. Her eyes filled with tears. I want to learn how to be a mother again. Brianna, I want to try. I looked at her, at this woman I loved but did not trust. Then start, I said, my voice soft, but firm. Start with the truth. She flinched, but she nodded. It was not a hug. It was not forgiveness, but it was, perhaps, a foundation. I did not take the helicopter back. I walked all the way back to Wade's Pine. The house was silent. The new pine sapling I had planted was catching the afternoon light. I walked inside and went to my fireproof safe. I took out the small, dark blue velvet box my grandfather had given me. The biometric key was no longer inside. It was with him. The box was just an empty container. I took it out to my deck. I sat down next to the small, new tree. I set the empty velvet box in the soft dirt next to its trunk. There were no fireworks. There was no champagne. I did not feel a rush of victory. I did not feel anything. I just felt safe. My house was mine. The structure was sound. The boundaries were set. The knots had been untied. Not with anger, but with truth, with paper, and with a very, very hard line. Thank you for listening to this story. Please comment below where you are listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and support us by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.